Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Songs That Define a Guitarist. Alongside in the co-captain's chair, Mr. Phil Aston from Now Spinning Magazine. What's up, Phil?
All right, thank you. And great to see you again, Pete. And thank you for such an interesting list again. And not all of them were easy. Some were
No.
easier than others, but some were like right up until going live, just. I've been thinking, what shall I pick?
Yeah, I've been changing my list over the last couple of weeks, and then yesterday I sat down with it again because I always like to kind of like the day before I like to sit down and just jot
Play
down
them
some
all?
talking
Yeah.
points and things like that, and make sure that I'm happy with my list. And I changed a couple of them yesterday because every day you could think, well, maybe this song and maybe that song. And for folks who are watching this show for the first time, perhaps we've been doing. I think this is our fifth episode. Basically, the format here is that each episode, one of us picks the 10 guitar players, and then we have to come up with one song that we feel best defines them as a guitar player. Doesn't have to be the most popular song that they're known for. Doesn't have to be the song with the best guitar solo or the best riff, although it could have both, right? But it's the song that we feel if we were to talk to someone who has no idea about who that player is or what they do, you say, this is the song that you listen to from X guitar player, and that'll give you a good indication of what their skills, what their style is all about, right? So in many instances, and this has happened, over the previous episodes here, we say all that, but then, maybe some of our picks are that most popular song for a reason, right? But we'll give you the reasons why we picked these. And everybody watching, feel free to play along down in the comments below. Once we've revealed all the guitar players, list your pick down below. Sometimes we get, I don't know, Phil, if you read I'm sure you read the comments too. Sometimes we get people who watch these shows for the first time and they just start naming all these random guitar players and songs. And I'm like, well, that's not really how it goes. You got to kind of play
Yeah.
along with the 10 that we've chosen, right? So, yeah, anyway. So, Phil is going to kick us off with our first player today. He is a blonde guitar god who's been in a number of bands, Mr. John Sykes.
John Sykes. Great choice, Pete. Because
Butch Jones will be proud of me today.
yeah, because I thought my first thought, John Sykes, straight into Whitesnake 1987. Yeah, that's the first place I went. But then I thought, no. Um, I wanted to pick something that I thought defined his style and defined where I felt he was going. So I picked the Blue Murder album from 1989. That meant I then had a selection of things to narrow it down to, and I'd got Out of Love was my first choice because it's a lovely ballad, fantastic fluid harmony bias guitar lines. But no, I thought it had to be something that also showed off his riffage, that guitar sound he had from Whitesnake that he carried through into this band, which also had some really kind of clever structures in the songs, etc. Great band, wonderful musicianship. So I've gone for Valley of the Kings from this.
My favorite song off that album. Great choice.
I think it's got everything, and the video for those of you go and hunt it down. I mean, the hairs everywhere. They look like they're on the verge of breaking through and being the biggest band the world's ever seen. It doesn't quite happen for whatever reason, but the song has got. It's not. I mean, it was a single, but it's not commercial. It's got loads of things in it, and to me, it kind of builds on from where he was coming from Thin Lizzy, from Tigers of Pantang, building through Whitesnake to where I felt this was his launch pad. So I felt that Valley of the Kings would be a good track to say to people, this is John Sykes. It shows his wonderful guitar playing, the speed, the melody, etc., but also this kind of really staccato riffage that he used a lot in the Whitesnake stuff as well. So that's my choice, Valley of the Kings.
And it's a great choice. I thought about that one. So, when it comes to John Sykes, where do you go? Because he's got a pretty storied discography. Those two Tigers of Pantang albums that he appeared on, pretty damn good. Thunder and Lightning could have easily gone there. The album that will be talked about in a second could easily go there. The album you mentioned, for sure. His solo albums, he's got some decent solo albums. I wouldn't say I would send anybody there for the
Hmm.
definitive John Sykes, but ultimately where I went was this album, because it's one
Yeah.
of my favorite albums of all time, and still to this day contains what I feel is some of his best playing ever. And I have to go with the US release, the first track on the album, which is Crying in the Rain. Granted, they did that, the band did that song before on a prior album, but they just, Coverdale decided to revisit it for this. And it just, to me, it embodies everything that John Sykes brought to the table, regardless of what band he's in. It's, first of all, the production gives his guitar sound. It's bigger than life. It's like the biggest guitar sound of his
Yep.
career, I think, from a production standpoint. They take this kind of bluesy hard rock song and make it this big molten riffarama. I mean, and then that Herculean guitar solo, it just never wants to end. It's just shredding, it's ballsy. To me, Crying in the Rain off of the Whitesnake self-titled album just screams Guitar Hero. And you hear it, and all I picture is that guy with the big curly blonde hair. He's got the button-up shirt that's, unbuttoned all the way to the navel. He's got that black Gibson Les Paul Custom. And if I want to tell someone one song from this guy, that's the song I'm going to give.
That's the good
Crying in
choice.
the Rain by John Sykes, Whitesnake.
Great choice.
Onwards to another guy who's amazing. Well, all these guys are amazing, really, but that's why we pick them. But
Yeah. This one, I felt that this is Frank Marino now. This
this
I
is the
found,
hard one, right?
yes, this one's really, really difficult.
This was the hardest one on this list for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I narrowed it down to 3 albums, mainly because they were all on one package on this CD here. And then I narrowed it down to 2. But the thing is with this guy, he's like a chameleon. He kind of weaves in and out of lots of different styles. So whatever I pick is not necessarily showing off other aspects of his playing. And so it came down to 2. One of them was Tales of the Unexpected, but that's almost like jazz fusion. I mean, that's where you could easily fit into with the jazz fusion guys. So it's not really what he's about, is it? And then I could pick a lot of the songs which are cover versions, which he does a lot of.
Yeah.
But then I thought, no, I want to find something that shows an element of control, but also that shines a light purely on him as a guitarist. And it has to be, for me, it was Electric Reflections of War.
That's a great one.
Off the live album, because it's just off the scale. Yes, it's a shredding extravaganza, but he's trying to interpret what war sounds like while using the electric guitar, and I think he does it. And he does all those kind of those sounds after we get past the ultra fast section, where he's making his guitar sound like literally, jets letting go of bombs and they're landing somewhere, whatever's going on, and the guitar conjures up that image of of a war, a horror of war through the guitar. And it's just an exercise in control in many respects. It's not, you could say anyone listening in, oh, just a guitar is shredding, it's just indulgence. I wouldn't say this is. I would say this is control and it's thought out. And it all obviously ends up with a bit of a drum solo as well. But that's what I've picked for Frank.
That's a great choice. I always felt, it's long been talked about how Frank Marino got his inspiration from Jimi Hendrix, and so many people who really don't know the music of Frank Marino, oh, it's just a Hendrix clone. And I never really thought that at all, but I know he loved Jimmy a lot. And I always thought that the track you picked to me was him trying to take Jimmy's rendition of the Star Spangled Banner from Woodstock
Yeah.
and kind of harness that whole idea of, and maybe even bits of Machine Gun as well, and
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
I'm going to do something that's a little bit more refined. Refined is a loose
Yeah.
term here, but I mean, you said it perfectly. You listen to that and you have these images of battlefields and bombs dropping and napalm and all this, right? It's all rolled up into that one track. And yeah, he goes for like the whole crazy shredding in the beginning, and then he's using all the different, whammy bar techniques and effects and all this kind of stuff. That's a really good, I mean, yeah, that's Frank Marino can do anything. And I think more than anything, what you said at the beginning about how he doesn't fit into any bucket is very true, because for this exercise, do you pick one of his hard rock songs? He was never a metal guitar player. He got lumped into
Yeah.
the category in the 70s, but he was, is he a hard rock guy? Yeah. Is he a blues rock player? Yeah. Is he a jazz and jazz fusion guy? Yeah. Is
Yeah.
he a psychedelic guitar player? Hell yeah. So I tried to pick something that maybe touched on all of that. And it's not easy because there's so much. And like you, I went to one of his live albums because to me, I love the studio albums, but he really shined on stage. And as someone who saw him live once, one of the most explosive, jaw-dropping experiences ever that I've seen a guitar player on stage. I went with Stories of a Hero from the Frank Marino Real Live album.
Wow. Yeah. Good
The
one.
studio version is great. This is even better because it's 10 minutes long, just under 10 minutes long. And what I like about this song is that it shows off his bluesy side. It certainly shows off his psychedelic side as well as his hard rock muscle. And I think it's a song that shows how he can create a big epic feel with lyrics, because the lyrics are important to this song too, about a soldier going out to war and then coming home and what's left when he comes back type of thing. And I think that Frank, using his guitar, builds that whole emotion and sense of drama in this song that really keeps up with the lyrical aspect of it. And then there's a couple solos in here. You got heavy you got like these kind of bluesy Hendrixy riffs in the beginning. Then you got around the chorus, you got the big riffing and then a really tasty solo. But then at the end of the song, he like does this whole long cadenza that just the chills go up and down the back of your neck. It's so good. He shows off his speed, but yet the playing is gutsy and from the heart. It's psychedelic, and I just think it's one of his masterful, masterful solos. I almost picked Poppy from this album, but Poppy is like this total jazz excursion. It's
Yeah.
amazing. But I went with Stories of a Hero because I think I always love these kind of like slow build type of songs. There's one that we're going to talk about much, much later in the show
Yeah.
from another guy who does almost the exact same thing as this. In fact, the songs are very similar, in my opinion,
Mm.
but we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, Stories of a Hero from Real Live, which is a really great live album. For those who haven't heard this, that is my pick for Frank Marino.
Brilliant. Well, the next guy I've picked because of how he serves the song rather than any guitar kind of heroics, really. And this is Warren DeMartini from Rat. And the album I've gone for is Out of the Cellar. And actually, the track, which isn't an obvious one, I imagine, for anybody, it's You're in Trouble, which is the second track in on side one. And it's because I remember buying the album and I went through the first track, Wanted Man. It was the second one, the way it starts with the drums and the bass and the guitar comes in with the kind of tremolo arm stuff, and it just and then later on the kind of really one line riffs and stuff. I just felt this was a guy that I needed to listen to, and I really feel the whole album is brilliant. I think it's a high watermark for Rat anyway. The production's fantastic, but it's that was the track that I felt. The guitar playing is fantastic. This is 1984. There was a hell of a lot of guitar players around this time,
It sure was.
almost with similar kind of templated kind of sound. But I felt that this put Rat to me ahead of the others who were kind of running along the same kind of lane, really. So that's my choice. You're in Trouble from Out the Cellar.
Yeah, I think Rat are one of those bands that over the course of time have their music has held up pretty well,
Yeah,
especially
I
the
agree.
first couple albums, right? I mean, to me, the first two albums are their best, but they have some really good stuff on the other albums. I think that when we look back on them, they kind of like take bits of Aerosmith and Van Halen and kind of put them together, and out comes this kind of different thing. You got these two really good guitar players, one of them really, really good, the guy we're talking about today. You got this guy on vocals who's not really a great singer, but he's really effective at doing what he does, and it helps make the band sound so unique. And
Yeah, true.
I think you can look back on the music of Rat and be like, wow, they were kind of a breath of fresh air when they first hit with that debut album. I ultimately, I listened to stuff from both first two albums, and I mean, you could pick any of them. Your choice is a great one. I really like that song a lot, actually. Ultimately, I went with a song that has a riff and solo that to me is some of his most memorable playing ever. And I went with, off the second album, Invasion of Your Privacy, I went with Lay It Down.
Great choice. Yeah, great riff. Yeah, wonderful song.
There's so many that you can pick
Yeah,
from this band, Phil, and I
yeah,
had others, that I was like, I wanted to go with a song that I think was more about just him and less about
yeah.
Robin Crosby, because so many of their great songs had the both of them doing
That's
this really
right.
cool
Yeah,
stuff. I mean, that kind of cascading circular riff that
yeah,
starts off the song is my favorite riff from him. I think it's just absolutely terrific. Pulls you right in the song. And I think the riff and even the solo have this great sense of like bluesy grooviness that he's so good at. He can shred,
yeah.
but I think that Warren always had this groove to his playing that some of his contemporaries didn't quite have like he did. Like I always think of like Warren and George Lynch, and we've talked about George Lynch before, and I think George Lynch technically is amazing. But I think that Warren grooves a little more than George does, in my opinion. But then I think that solo has got so much groove and so much feel to it. And yeah, it's a little flashy, but it's not overly flashy. It's
That's a great
understated,
choice.
and it's like the notes that he chooses are so, so good. And that's why I picked this song. I just think that for me, in his whole arsenal of everything he's ever done, that solo and that riff to me are his most memorable. Plus, his tone is amazing. I mean, his tone on these first two albums, so good. And it's just tasty as all hell. So, yeah, Lay It Down from Invasion of Your Privacy.
Yeah, I think listen to you kind of describe that. Then I think I probably would have picked that as my choice in another
Nothing wrong
time.
with your pick, though. Your pick is
Yeah,
good
I
too.
mean, because you're right. It's got there's certain riffs like lack of communication off out in the cellar is a great riff, but you're right. Lay It Down um, is an absolutely brilliant track. Right, the next one, Brian Robinson from Thin Lizzy. This was just instant for me. If I can find it. Yes, it's from Live and Dangerous, and it's Still in Love with You. I, it's just, I mean, there's the obviously we've all seen the video of him playing that as well, and it's just that song. I know Scott Gorham does a little bit at the end of it, but it's the lights are on Brian for that. It just that whole it's a highlight of Live and Dangerous in a way. I know there are other rock songs and stuff sitting all around it, but that is like it's a ballad, it's a rock song, it builds, it comes down, it pulls at the heartstrings, it has everything. And the way that Brian plays it, it's got such feel and style to it and control. And when you watch the visuals with it as well, you can just see the way he plays. He's got attitude. He's got, he's in complete control of the instrument, and that solo just fits in with Phil Lynot's lyrics, the feel of everything. It's just perfect.
That's a great choice. To me, there was only two choices for this. No, I shouldn't say only two choices, but there were two, for me, pretty obvious choices. That was one of them. The other one's also from this album, and I
Oh, yeah.
ultimately went with the other one because it's my favorite Thin Lizzy song. And I think that it's, when you're talking Brian Robertson, you have to also talk Scott Gorham, because
You
the
do.
two of them will forever be linked through the end of time. And I think this song that I picked has the two of them teaming up for one of the most lethal riffs ever, or series of riffs, because it's not just
Yeah.
one riff.
Yeah.
And then the guitar solo by Robbo, to me, just kills me just as much as the one you just mentioned. And it's Emerald from Live and
Ah, yeah.
Dangerous. you know, that stabbing, slashing, spiraling solo from Robertson, and then the riff, or like I said, series of riffs that they create. I mean, I'm hearing Emerald, the whole riff series going off in my head. It's so Thin
Yeah.
Lizzy, it's so Irish, it's so amazing. And I think it's one of the great hard rock riffs of all time. And I think this is, to me, one of his two greatest solos of a long time, alongside yours. So I'm really happy that we both picked the ones that I think are no-brainers to talk about a defining song from a guitar player. And what's really a shame about Brian Robertson is that we haven't really gotten much of anything from him in so many years. He's another one of those guys that just was so prolific in this band. And, yeah, he was in Wild Horses and did a couple other things back in the 80s after Thin Lizzy kind of, went by the wayside. But man, it's just, I would love to hear more from him. And, because so much of what he contributed to this band was just so amazing. But yeah, anyway, Emerald is my choice to go along with yours. 2 mandatory tracks from Brian Robertson.
Both from the same album.
Both from the same album. Yeah. The studio versions are great too, right?
Yeah, they are indeed. Yeah. Right. The next song was hard, but for lots of reasons, really. Alex Lifeson from Rush. Now, a bit of a kind of, I'll have to be honest here. When I was growing up in the 70s and early 80s, I didn't get Rush. I'm one of those people that couldn't get past the voice. I found it really difficult. People were lending me 2112 and say, Phil, you got to listen to this and all the rest. And I was going, oh, I like the first album a bit because it was more metal. And as we entered through the 80s, I think someone realized that I was having trouble getting past Geddy's voice at this point, and they put a track on, and it didn't have the voice on. It was just the music, and it was YYZ from Moving Pictures. And they didn't say who it was, and this track, which seemed to go from like complete progressive rock to like jazz fusion to these melodic lines, and then afterwards I was told that's Alex Lifeson from Rush, and then I became a fan, and so to this day that is because that's the doorbell into the world of Rush for me, and it's such an amazing. Well, it felt so un-Rush like to me as well. That is the track that if someone said to me, "Well, who's Alex Lifeson? Give me an idea," I would put YYZ on from Moving Pictures. I just think I played it before we went live, and it still sends shivers down the back.
Oh, it's amazing.
Spine, really.
It's absolutely amazing.
That's the one. So yeah, that.
It's funny because Rush really, when you think about it, could have just been an instrumental band, and they would have been terrific also, right? Obviously. Yeah. Geddy's voice is such a important part of the band's history and all their albums, of course. But whenever they chose to do instrumentals, they always knocked it out of the park. Always. So one of my choice is an instrumental as well. This was, I kind of like you. This was very easy for me. He's got to me there are so many songs that you could say define him as a player, and he kind of changed up his sound so much over the years. Depending on what type of guitars he was using, amps and effects, because you listen to him in the 80s versus the 70s, very different. You listen to him in the 90s, very different, right? It still sounds like Alex, but he's always trying to improve himself and evolve and whatnot, right? But for me, I always go back to one song when I think of Alex Lifeson, the genius of Alex Lifeson, and a song that gives you everything that Alex Lifeson was all about. And that is La Villa Strangiato from Exit Stage Left. Could have picked the studio version off of Hemispheres, which is amazing. But to me, the definitive version of that song is the last track on this live album. And it's so incredible. You get the gorgeous acoustic parts of it. You get the thunderous heavy riffs. You get those soft melodic electric solos, and then you get the just balls out shredding. And it's complicated. It's beautiful. He's the guy who, like in your choice, perfect solos for every song. He never oversteps his bounds. Every solo sounds perfectly composed to fit within however many bars he's given in a song. That's what I love about him. And what's really great about Alex Lifeson, I think one of the things that we're going to be saying about him probably long after he's gone, is that it's not often that you get a guitar player who can come up with a guitar solo that is just as memorable as the vocal melody lines or the choruses, right? How many Rush classics do you know, or can you hum the guitar solo, right? It's even on a song like La Villa Strangiato, I'm hearing it in my head, that closing moment when he's doing the volume swells and then he slowly builds to those, he's picking like mad, and it's just, I can hear it in my head always. I can hear the solo from YYZ in my head. Sorry, YYZ. I know that's the proper way to say it.
Yeah.
Us dumb Americans, it's always Z, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we could sit here all day and talk about Alex Lifeson guitar solos and deconstruct how perfect they are from, the notes that are chosen, the phrasing, the tone, all that sort of thing. I mean, he's one of our true greats. And I think as time goes on, myself personally, I've always loved him, but I appreciate him more and more and more. And I think for anybody watching the show, who has never really been a Rush fan, but maybe you like guitar players a lot and you haven't really discovered the greatness of Alex Lifeson, YYZ and La Villa Strangiato are the best places to start. They really are. There's so much other greatness in this
Yeah.
catalog, but those two give you the essence of what Alex Lifeson is all about. I'll stop there. Oh, it's always, Phil, one of the joys about doing a show like this is it's not only fun because it makes us work and think, but I think it's also a great time to pay tribute to a lot of our heroes. And many of these are still with us, so which is good. But I think it's just
no. I totally agree. And the other thing I like about doing these is that it means that in every one of these shows we've done so far, all the albums we mention have been in on my CD drive or turntable for days afterwards, because you mentioned things that I haven't thought of so much, or I haven't played that album for much. The Mahogany Rush live one, for instance, I know that's the first thing I'm going to be playing. So I think it's great. It's kind of like re-exploring things you've had for ages, but you haven't really given it, listening time for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
The next guy is Uli Jon Roth. Now, my choice here has a tenuous link in a way to the Mahogany Rush Frank Marino choice, in that the way that what Frank Marino was playing was like the kind of musical version of a war. My track for Uli Jon Roth, also that was going through his mind at the same time. It's from Tokyo Tapes, and it's Fly to the Rainbow. because it's similar in its execution in some ways, because it's a great track. Uli Jon Roth's vocals aren't the best, but when he moves away from the microphone and just concentrates on the guitar, he takes us on a journey that's like just to nowhere else. And this is another guitarist who can play very much, is that there's a Hendrix vibe in there, just like Frank Marino, and just like Frank Marino, he just switches off into this, making the tremolo arm sound like it is literally rockets falling out of the sky. It's just immense, and I think it's a great track anyway. But I think it's a great focus on who is Uli Jon Roth. Where should we, what should we listen to? I think this song sums him up in his vision of what he wanted to do with electric guitar, and where he was at the time. And of course, I think it's just a great entry point, and if anyone wants to know what he's like.
Yeah, man, I played that album to death when I was growing up. When I was a young guy, a young kid, and just discovering guitar players and starting to play myself, and it was all about stuff like that. And I used to play Tokyo Tapes over and over and over again, and I used to play that song and Polar Nights constantly because I loved that aspect of Uli's playing. That whole, him with the Stratocaster, with the overdriven Stratocaster, with just wrangling that tremolo bar till it was ready to break off. And I think the closing moments of Fly to the Rainbow is just absolute genius. Absolute genius. And he does a similar type thing in Polar Nights as well.
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
agree with you. Yeah, his vocals kind of suck. But I got really used to his voice, right? And
Yeah.
it's because you knew that any song that he was singing in was going to have ridiculous guitar heroics, just absolutely ridiculous. I I wrestle with this one too because to me there was a very obvious choice, and then there were two or three choices that probably mean a little more to me personally. One of them was what you picked, and I ultimately didn't go with that. There were two other choices from that album I was going to go with. I ultimately went with his signature song, and it's from Taken by Force, and it's The Sails of Sharon.
Yeah.
I mean, was anybody doing stuff like this back then?
Nope.
We had Eddie Van Halen was just hitting right, but I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just
It
nobody.
just, it doesn't follow any pattern, that riff, does it? It's just
No,
completely unique. Yeah.
it's just bonkers crazy, right? And the
Yeah.
solo is just crazy because it's got like this like neoclassical shredding before we ever had neoclassical shredding. So
Yeah. True.
for everybody who loves Yngwie Malmsteen and Vinnie Moore and Tony McAlpine and Paul Gilbert and all those guys, he was doing it way before then. But he, like you said, he throws in this kind of like bluesy psychedelic Hendrix aspect with this neoclassical thing, and it's just, and Scorpions weren't a big band back then, right? It's just
No,
amazing to
no.
think that a couple years later they would blow up and be really huge. But I always found it was really a shame that all this Roth era stuff just never really got the credit it's due. I think now it does today. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I think this is just it's his tour de force in the studio. It's a shame, Bill, that we didn't get a live version of this song on that album. I think that's one of the, if I on my biggest wish list, and I have a lot of things on my wish list, but I always wanted Tokyo Tapes to have a couple extra tracks. Take out the rock and roll medley, the old song medley,
Yeah. Yeah.
take
Yeah.
out the little Japanese things here and there, and I know why they did all that, but throw in a live version of Sales of Sharon, and I think that all of a sudden becomes not one of the greatest live albums of all time, but maybe the greatest live album of all time. So yeah, but that's my pick. Sales of
Yeah.
Sharon.
And
Take it.
I wonder if when they did that, because that was the Take My Thoughts was the first Scorpions album I ever bought, and I wonder if they thought at the time that Sales of Sharon was like too unusual to play live. Maybe they were a bit reticent about thinking, is it going to go down well? Because a lot of the songs they picked for Tokyo Tapes was obviously all crowd pleasers, wasn't it? Like
Yeah.
full on rock, get everyone punching the air and shout along with them. And
Team
maybe
Rock
they
Fever,
thought
With
that one
Over
was
the
too,
Sky, all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, maybe they thought this is a bit funky. I don't know what people are going to think of this, because that track has taken on a life of its own as the years have rolled by, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. But to me, I mean, I absolutely, if we were to revisit the track list of Tokyo Tapes, how do you not have, and in more recent reissues, they throw like a Hellcats in there, right? But how do you not have Sales of Sharon and Virgin Killer on in that set list? To
Yep, yeah, yeah,
me, that would have made it just absolutely lethal. So let's take out a couple things that are maybe like, to me, again, I know a lot of bands in the 70s were doing that whole rock and roll medley thing because you can get in old time rock fans, and a lot of these guys were
yeah,
into that sort of music when they grew up. But you take that out, that's like what, 5 6 minutes you can take out there. You take out the little Japanese sing along thing
yeah.
that they do, and you throw in a couple extra tracks, and all of a sudden this is
Got a different feel altogether.
a
Yeah,
totally different live album, right? As great as it is, it becomes even better. So
yeah.
anyway,
Right, the next one, Steve Morse. This is another guy where, even as I'm about to tell you what I've chosen, my brain is already thinking you could have picked other things here, Phil, to really show off who Steve Morse is, because this is a guy who can play country picking, heavy metal, jazz. There isn't anything he can't do. So my my searchlight should have been scanning over the Dixie Dregs catalog in a way, but I was thinking, what's the first thing that comes into my mind when I think is Steve Morse? And it was a Purple track, because I was thinking that Purple at the time, it was all Richie. Without Richie, there's no Purple. Blah blah blah. But he came into that. He came into that band, and he basically turned it on its head, reinvented it, and pushed it forwards. And to me, there was one song that for a while was in their set list that I felt really showed what Steve Morse was as a person, as a guitarist, but also gave Purple a chance to have another career. And that song was Sometimes I Feel Like Screaming. I thought, should I choose the one off Perpendicular? But I felt it came to something else live. So I picked Total Abandon, which was from the Australian tour in 99, because of the way it builds and the way he improvises, but also does those kind of really complicated runs that are his trademark. So that's what I picked. Um, Maybe it should have been Dixie Drex, but I felt that Sometimes Feel Like Screaming should have been in the Purple set forever. It was like their new child in time without the screaming, just a signature song that showed off. This is Steve Morse. He's our guitar guy now. And it was just a beautiful melody, wonderful, clean lines, well thought out, but equally, it gave him space to really shred, but in a way that was that brought in all of his Dixie Dregs style guitar playing and all his solo stuff as well. So that's my choice.
A great choice. So when I was trying to figure out what to pick from Steve Morse, who's one of my favorites of all time, I love him. I had one song identified from the Dixie Dregs. I had one song identified from the Steve Morse Band, and I had one song identified from Deep Purple. That was my Deep Purple choice. And whether you pick the live or the studio version, that's one of those sends chills up and down your
Yeah.
spine moments. And I remember when he first joined Deep Purple and they played that song a bit on the first couple of tours. Uh, I would just be amazed at hearing all the emotion coming out in this playing because Steve is one of those guys where I think at times he's been accused of not having as much emotion in his playing because he's so technically proficient. But I never believed that. I never bought that whole line of thinking. And I think that sometimes I feel like Screaming that shows you what he's all about right there. It's so good. I mean, that first album Perpendicular is really, really good. He's got some great playing on that. And that just basically announced that I'm the new guy in the band. I don't sound like Richie. I'm not trying to sound like Richie. When we play the classics live, I'll honor him and whatnot, but I'm going to bring my own feel to the band, and he totally did. I ultimately decided to go with one from the Steve Morse Band, and it's the first song on his first solo album, The Introduction, and it is Cruise Missile from this.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Great
You could
track.
pick so many
Yeah,
Dixie
that
songs.
is a brilliant choice. Yeah, brilliant choice.
So, and what I like about it, Phil, is that I think he shows you his whole arsenal right in that song. Because it's a pretty heavy song, it's all instrumental, obviously. It's kind of funky. You got a little bit of that
Yeah.
chicken picking in there. You got some blazing shredding. You got some heavy moments, and it's like all jam-packed into this just fiery, fiery rock song. Is it rock? Is it bluegrass? Is it metal? Is it classical? Is it fusion? Is it everything all rolled into one? I don't know. Maybe it is, but and his alternate picking technique I've always found to be just absolutely fascinating because when you watch Steve play, it always seems like he's working so hard, right? And especially now when he's got the wrist issue, right? So when you
Yeah.
watching him on Rick Beato not too long ago, and watching him trying to do his alternate picking technique with his wrist issues, it looks almost like painful, and it looks like he's working like so hard, but man, the results are just always spectacular. So yeah, Cruise Missile, first track off the first solo album, set you to the stars right off the bat. So that is my choice.
Yeah, what's the name of the bass player? Is it can't remember the guy's name. Is it
Oh,
something LaRue? Something LaRue?
Jerry Peak. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because what makes, for those of you watching this thinking, where do I go if you want to get to Steve Morse? His his solo stuff and Dixie Dregs, he always had the bass player was really playing lots of funky slap bass,
Yeah.
real kind of jazzy stuff, great drumming and everything. But Morse has got that way of playing all genres in the same track without
Yeah.
you even noticing he's switching channels. He's
Yeah.
just that kind of guy, isn't he?
He's like the jack of all trades. That's Steve.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Brad Gillis is next. I found this quite tricky, so I had to kind of focus on the track that made me stand up and notice and think, who's that? And it's from Dawn Patrol, which was the first album I bought by where I heard about Brad. And it's the first one, Don't Tell Me You Love Me, because it didn't start like an obvious opening song. Again, we're talking about this Rat Dokken period where albums are all starting to have that same kind of look and feel. It didn't start like that. It started more kind of gentle but very imaginative way of starting the song. But I just love the way that Brad weaves in and out with some really imaginative chord work, guitar playing, etc. And of course, we know that there was many sides to this guy because we didn't see it coming that he'd be playing on an Ozzy Osbourne live album literally a few months down the line, playing stuff like The Wizard, and Children of the Grave, which shows he's a multi-dimensional player. But I, for this show, I've picked that song, opening track from Dawn Patrol.
Yeah, I also wanted to do Night Ranger. I mean, I know it's kind of for some people, I'm sure it's easy to say, well, just pick any Sabbath song from Speak of the Devil, but
Yeah,
he did that tour and his playing is great on that. But to me, the real Brad Gillis is on any Night Ranger album, right?
yeah,
And I almost picked yours. I really wanted to
Oh,
pick that song. Um, the reason I didn't, I don't know why. Why didn't I, Pete? I don't know. I really don't know why. That was my first choice. That was my first
oh,
choice. And then
brilliant. Yeah.
I was like, well, I could pick Sister Christian because the
Yeah.
solo
Yeah. I
in
nearly
that
picked
is
that. Yeah. I nearly went
classic.
there. Yeah.
I ultimately decided to go with Touch of Madness from Midnight Madness, the same album that Sister Christian is
Yeah.
on.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I love the riffing on this song, and we need to mention Jeff Watson here too as well because they kind of it's kind of like the Rat thing, right? You got these two guys that work so well together, and but I think Touch of Madness has some really snarling riffing from the two of these guys, and then the solo spot late in the song is really good. So you have this kind of like middle solo, which has the two of them going back and forth, and they do that on your track as well. Don't Tell Me You Love You is masterful. Where you got the
Yeah.
Gillis solo in the beginning, and then you got the Watson solo, and these guys don't sound anything alike, so you always know who's playing what. But here you get the two guys going back and forth, and then the whole ending solo is all Brad, and he's doing all these trademark whammy bar, wow, 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 wow. He
Yeah.
does all this crazy stuff. And it's zany, it's wacky, but it really gives you, a sense of what I think Brad Gillis is all about. It's very melodic, but he's got that unpredictable sense and he loves that whammy bar, right? So you have to have something there. So yeah, that's my choice. Touch of Madness from Midnight Madness.
Right. And that brings us to number 9, which is Aldi Meola. And now I found this hard. Now, there's something about when we picked like John McLaughlin, Lee Retinour, Larry Carlton, they're all jazz players. Now, there's something about the jazz fusion guys. We, the rock guys are kind of, they are what they are. And you get in amongst the songs and the albums and you know them for years and they like your friends. You just know them. There's something about the jazz fusion guys where doesn't matter how many times you play the albums, even ones that you really love, this you kind of discover something new the next time. There's so much going on. So that makes it even more difficult to actually home in on something and go, that one. Now, this was so hard. So I was looking at these, thought, well, these are really good, but it had to be one album, and it's Return to Forever and it's Romantic Warrior. Now, if we ever do a show about drummers, Lenny White comes up, I would pick this album. If Stanley Clark comes up, if we do one about bass players, it will be on this one. Keyboard players, Korea be on this one. So it has to be. How do you mean? It's this one. This is like to me it's like it's jazz fusion, it's jazz rock, but it's also probably a template for prog metal. But in some ways, it's just so where do I go? So I picked the track, the last one, Jewel of the Jester, which again, if we ever mention any of the musicians who play on this record, that track would probably be picked for all of them. It shows off them all in equal measure. But as we get to the 7-minute mark, because this is a big track, Al just lets rip with these absolutely frantic lead lines with no bending of the notes, just speed. And then it pulls back, and then he does something completely different. He's got like funky parts in it. It's as if he's demonstrating what an electric guitar can do in a showroom or something. But it's in the context of a song. And even though there are no lyrics on this at all, there are little musical motifs that are like earworms that just sit inside your brain forever. I'm sounding like I'm just reviewing this record on its own there, but I just think
It's
this
brilliant. I
is
mean,
just a
it's absolutely
masterpiece.
brilliant. Yeah.
It's just a masterpiece.
Yeah. That is a great choice. And you're right. There is so much to choose from with this guy. And you know what's crazy, Phil? He was so young when they did that album.
Yes, he was, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, his time, he was such a young guy during his
Yeah.
little stint in Return to Forever and just such a master of the guitar at such an early age. And man, his Les Paul tone on all those early albums is just so good. Yeah, this was kind of difficult. I went through like all this, the Return to Forever stuff, the first handful of solo albums. I'm like, God, you could pick any song from any of these. So I ultimately though decided to go with a song from this album right here, which is his live album,
Yeah, that's
of
brilliant.
course, live. And I went with Race for the Devil on Spanish Highway. There's so, like I said, there's so many to choose from.
Yeah,
And
there's
Studio
too
One
many.
is great. I love the studio version, which is on Elegant Gypsy, but man, the version on this just absolutely scorches. And again, it gives you a lot of flavors of what he does. You know, the little flamenco kind of Latin jazz thing. You got the rock firepower. It's fast, it's furious, it's groovy, and it shows his incredible technique. And it's like, you know, when you go to see Al Di Meola live, either back then or even today, this song is always like kind of like the showstopper in the middle of the set. And it's just like everybody gets all excited for this. And it just shows like what a speed demon he was back then. You know, you talk about all these metal players, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
we mentioned Uli Roth before. You know, really, if you listen to guys like Yngwie and all those shrapnel shredders in the 80s, would they be where they were if not for guys like Uli Jon Roth and Al Di Meola and John McLaughlin? I mean, they
yeah,
were doing
exactly. Yeah,
this. They were speeding down the highway way before these guys were. So you know, Frank Marino too. So yeah, Race for the Devil on Spanish Highway from this particular album is my pick for Al Di Meola. Great song.
great choice, Pete. Brilliant choice. The last one, I have a feeling we might pick the same one. This is Dave Meniketti from Y&T. To me, this could only be one track. This guy is not only a superb guitarist, he's an absolutely brilliant vocalist. And you don't normally get the two in the one package. There's always one side, either the vocals or guitar is slightly less than the other, as we've discussed with some of the players. But I think Dave's voice is so soulful and so emotive, but equally his guitar playing is. So it has to be Earthshaker, and it has to be I Believe in You. Last track, side two. I just think the guitar playing here, the build of the song, because it's the structure of it and he's playing, it just pulls you in. And when he needs to go into the sixth gear, he does, towards the race to the finish. And that ending of this song, which is like every ending of every rock song you could imagine, every kind of cliche or chord sequence, crash endings, it's just brilliant. It's just, that's the one. I Believe in You from Earthshaker, 1981.
Yeah, it's the one. I went with the live version though from
Oh,
Yesterday and Today
yeah,
Live.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
either one is appropriate
yeah,
here. Yeah, there was only one choice here. As much as I tried to convince myself to pick like Mean Streak or any other song,
yeah.
I was like, it's got to be I Believe in You. And for all the reasons you gave, and yeah, it must be said that he is a really good singer, and his vocals in most cases are just as impressive as the guitar playing. I mean, I love the kind of Hendrixy chords and fills on the first half of the song. It's just so I don't know, it's just so kind of lush and emotional and whatnot. And then you get the big chunky riffs at the chorus, and then the first solo is like lyrical but very emotional, those long sustained singing notes. And then you got that kind of like whole like Freebird like jam at the end where he just goes ballistic, right? He goes, you
Yeah.
shouldn't, but it still has a lot of feel. I think he's one of the great guitar players of the last 45 years that never gets enough credit. He's one of the guys, you know, we used to do a show here on the channel called the Guitar Corner, and you know, we did shows on some of like the best Les Paul players, guys who only ever played Les Pauls. He's one of them. I mean, for
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
reason, he never comes up in these conversations when you talk about those signature guys on a Gibson Les Paul, and he's one of them. He's the older I get, the more I just realize what a underrated master musician and vocalist he really is, and he's like one of our true gems here in the States of a musician who just never quite got the accolades I think that he was due, and just a really great player all around, a really great band for one. And like I said, if you're watching this show and you've never really listened to Y&T, but you're curious now, go listen to I Believe in You.
Yeah,
You'll
I mean,
become a believer, trust me.
yeah, I mean that is the Earthshaker album has got so many good moments on it.
My favorite. Yeah,
You know,
it's my favorite.
shredding side with Hurricane and Rescue Me. You know, it's just brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, great choices.
Yeah, yeah, we could sit and talk about Meniketti and Y&T for the next, 5 minutes, and it would be no big deal.
Yeah,
It seems like Y&T has been coming up on the channel quite a bit in recent months, but obviously we've got the new book from Tim Derling that I was happy to participate in, and that again, gave me another reason to re-dive into the music of this band once again, and I just got his Meniketti album for the first time ever recently, and that's really good too.
all
Um,
right.
Yeah, so yeah, great player. All great players today. So of course, for everybody watching, play along, take our 10, see if you agree with our choices, but maybe if you have something different, list below what you feel is their defining song, right? And if you've never heard any of these guitar players, we've just given you
Yeah, a starting
20,
point.
20 songs in total, right? Because actually a little bit less because we only duplicated once today.
Yeah,
We usually get at least one per
yeah, we
episode.
do, we do. Yeah,
I think
yeah,
a couple episodes ago we had two or three, but today
yeah.
we did it once. But yeah, sometimes there's just really obvious choices, really obvious
Mm.
choices. But so as always, I'm curious to so Phil picks next episode, and I'm curious to what he comes up with for those 10. And I've got I got a list I'm working for the following month. We'll see what Phil gives me for next month. So I may have to cross some of mine off, but that's quite all right because there's so many to choose from. There's
Yeah,
so many to
there
choose
are
from.
indeed. Yeah, there are indeed.
So Phil, plug your channel and what's coming up on Now Spinning. You've got some really good content of late.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's nowspinning.co.uk is the website. Now Spinning with me, Phil Aston, on YouTube. I've got some podcasts coming up with Chester Thompson, talking about his new album, and he also talks about his time with Weather Report and Santana. And I've also got a little slot with Steve Howe next month as well. They're currently on tour, yes, in Europe, and also doing a big feature on Rainbow on stage, and that's after talking to Martin Popoff about Rainbow a couple of weeks ago. It's a bit like talking to you, Pete. I'll probably have things coming up on the channel based on what we've been talking about as well, and also a new series called Meet the Collector, and talking to other people about their collections or what it is that really kind of drives them to fill their houses with physical music, as we have behind us. So that's
Absolutely.
Now Spinning.
Absolutely. And for those watching, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, Phil and I did an episode on his channel a couple of weeks back talking about some of the classic album closers of all time. So I think a lot of people have been watching that, but in
Yeah,
case you
a
haven't,
lot of people watch that, and we're going to do a great openers season, aren't we?
yes, yes.
Which will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that'll be featured both on Now Spinning and here on Sea
Yeah,
Tranquility. So that'll be like a multi-part series. So
yeah,
that'll be
that'll
coming
be
up in the
fantastic.
weeks ahead. So Phil and I will
Yeah,
be doing more collaborating. So stay tuned for that. But of course, next month, the next installment of guitar songs that define a guitar player or a guitarist.
yeah.
And so stay tuned for that and visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Please head over onto Now Spinning and give a subscribe over there. Help Phil out and make sure you click on that notification there too so you get alert of all of his content because Phil is
Thank you very
posting
much.
pretty regularly over there as well. So thanks for watching, everybody. See you soon here on the channel for more stuff for Phil Aston and Pete Pardo. Have a good week, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.